Business Growth Talks podcast is created and hosted by Mark Hayward. In this show, we talk about how to grow a business in the growth stage. The growth stage is often marked by rapid developments, increased revenue, and an escalating customer base. In each episode, we talk to entrepreneurs and business owners who have grown businesses, and we cover topics like scaling processes, market expansion, financial management, human resource and talent development, and customer retention. If you are looking for actionable advice, tips, and techniques on how to grow, run and build your business, this is the podcast for you.
Welcome to Business Growth Talks, the podcast where we delve deep into stories and strategies behind successful business leaders and innovative companies. I'm your host, Mark Hayward, and today we have a fascinating guest joining us. In this episode, we welcome Sam Glasswell, the co-founder and CEO of Arbolus, a pioneering third-generation expert network. Sam's journey in the expert network industry began in 2008 when he joined a pre-revenue startup and played a crucial role in scaling the business to a remarkable $1 billion. His experience at Genpact and AlphaSite saw him be a leadingly significant expansion into the US market, cementing his reputation as a key player. Join us as we deep dive into Sam's entrepreneurial journey as the founder of Arbolus and how they are transforming the landscape of expert insights and tech-driven solutions. Stay tuned for this inspiring conversation with Sam on Business Growth Talks. Hey Sam, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Mark?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for joining me today. This is actually an area which we've never had on the show. I think your business model is relatively unique, and you're probably going to tell me there's lots of competitors, but this is not an area that
that doesn't surprise me that much, to be honest. Maybe that's a good thing as well.
Absolutely. It's going to be a fascinating area. So we'll talk about Arbolus in a minute. But the first question that I ask all of my guests is, what does a business mindset mean to you?
I think that's a great question. I would use, maybe just to keep it concise, two words spring to mind. So I think the first would be optimism. I don't think you can achieve anything in business without positive thinking and without a sort of a winning mentality. And the second word I would use would be agility. Nothing stays the same for very long, and I think great businesses have agility and can move and react to certain situations.
So optimism, I totally get, and I understand that. And I also get the idea of having to change, adapt, pivot your business. But where have you had to have agility in this with Arbolus? How have you actually changed something in your business for the better?
Yeah, we started our company in 2018, so about 6 years ago, and we knew the industry really well. Both of us as co-founders had spent many years within a similar industry. So when we started the company, we had a broad idea of the innovation that we'd drive within this space. And still today, the headline points of what we wanted to do are actually still very consistent, but I don't think we could have predicted exactly how the journey evolved. So When we released our first product, we had a couple of features that were the core value propositions, and those value propositions have evolved significantly over time. We've built two new products on the platform since 2018. One of the more recent ones is a video survey tool called Canopy. We would have never conceived that in 2018. We only figured that out and figured out that there was a market for that after we'd won our first few customers, and after we got the feedback from them, that's what they wanted. So that's really what I mean by agility. And that's for me the most exciting thing about being an entrepreneur, because if there's one thing I can guarantee you, it's that in 4 years' time or 5 years' time, our business will look very different. Product will look very different. And that's honestly why entrepreneurship is such an exciting path and why we love doing what we're doing.
And who is the product guy? Who's the person that's coming up with new features and new services in your business?
I think, so my co-founder, Will, is very product orientated. That's part of the reason that we decided to work together. We get on really well, but we're very different people. And Will has a technical mind, a very product orientated mind. But at the same time, I would answer that question as everybody in the whole company is involved in that process, right? People in our client teams are speaking day in and day out to our clients. They're collecting feedback and implementing that all the time. Obviously, our engineering team are now starting to speak increasingly to clients almost on a weekly basis. They're engaged with calls with our key customers. So I think this is what we talk about a lot internally at Arbolus. Everybody has a responsibility to drive that innovation and get the
Right.
best feedback from the market.
So we'll come on to innovation because I think what you're doing is quite innovative and quite different, and the markets that you're serving. So let's go into Arbolus in a little bit. But my next question is, tell me one thing about your upbringing which reflects on who you are today.
Yeah, great question. I think about that a lot. So I grew up outside of London, and my family has a 75-year-old furniture business. It started in 1946 by my great-grandfather. He co-founded it with my grandfather. It's grown to quite a big company now, 300 or so people. And so I think, and that's the business that I spent every single summer when I had a break from school or university working in. So I think subconsciously, I've probably been an entrepreneur since about the age of 11, really, in one form or another. And I think that had a huge impact in shaping my mindset. Yeah, I think, and then not to mention the fact that the first company I joined when I graduated from university was a pre-revenue startup, which ultimately became a very big company. So again, I've been around this in one way or another for as long as I can remember. And yeah, that's the biggest driver, I think, to what I've done today.
So why do you think entrepreneurs are different? They have a different mindset. They have a different approach to things, which coming up a lot on social media and on podcasts about the idea that schools are not helping, promoting, encouraging people to be entrepreneurial. But barring your family's experiences or your experience with your family business, why do you think you are entrepreneurial and you've gone down that path?
Why do I think I'm entrepreneurial and how am I different? Yeah, it's a good question. I think the first thing I'd say is I think entrepreneurship is generally glamorized, right? Every business podcast you listen to is about entrepreneurs who've probably gone on to be pretty successful. And yes, some of them talk about the pain along the way, but still it's a very glamorized thing. There are some parts of it that are fantastic. I wouldn't choose any other path for myself, but it's not for everybody. So I think what makes entrepreneurs somewhat unique, it's an irrational thing to do. You go through significant failure, significant setbacks. Even if you're a successful company, those far outweigh the wins. And you have to, I think, resilience is probably one of the most important qualities, I think, for any entrepreneur. People who aren't going to be deterred or put out too much by some of those setbacks. I think what else would I say? It is also a very people-orientated game. You can't build a business without people. And I get asked this question a lot. What's the one reason that we will continue to be successful as a business and continue to grow at the rate that we have? People is absolutely the thing. If you have an ability to bring the right people in, motivate them in the right ways, show them a vision that's really exciting to them, that has, huge effects, because one person can't do it on their own, right? You're a more powerful business if everybody in the boat is rowing in the same direction. And this is probably something that, maybe in the very, very early days might not be as essential, but if you're going to scale a business to large levels, 100 million revenue business, unicorn status, things like that, there's absolutely no way that you can do that without aligning everybody and doing it through others.
So is your idea that culture in your business, how has the culture in your business developed?
Yeah, culture is such a funny thing because in the early days, I think culture is so clearly tied to the founders. When you're like 2 co-founders and your first 3 or 4 employees, of course, everybody's close to you as co-founders. And inevitably, I think people tend to follow your values. They've opted into a very early stage business and they've joined it primarily because they're buying into the founder's vision or the founder's values. As a company grows, and we're, I think, 170 people now, that's impossible. There's people, we've got 4 offices around the world. There's people joining all the time who I might not meet for 6 months because I don't go to that office within that period. Possibly even some people that I might not meet ever because they might come into the business and leave the business before I've had a chance to travel to that location. So culture is actually being led by everybody in the business. And it's something actually that you can't control at a certain point of time. Once the train has left the station and you start scaling as a business, culture is created by the individuals in the company, which is terrifying as well as exciting. I think our culture is great and really unique. I think still today, one of our values as founders is that we want to keep evolving things, keep breaking things, keep testing the status quo. I think that's really ingrained within our organization. I think there's things like one of our values is make it happen, because we really value execution over hypotheses and things like that. And that's something I see whenever I go to any of our offices. Everybody has that same mindset of just, let's get it done. Let's move fast and break things. And that's great. But there's, I'm sure, lots of other things that have evolved, which is a really good thing as we've grown as a company.
Yeah. So tell me about Arbolus. What do you do? Who do you serve? Who are the clients that you work with?
Yeah, so we're an expert insights business. So we're a platform that helps, we typically serve clients like private equity investors, consulting firms, and we help those businesses when they're doing research on a potential investment. They use our platform to be able to get insights from experts on that topic. So I'll give you a concrete example. Let's say a private equity firm is looking to do a deal in a payment technology company. But before they invest large amounts of money, they want to be able to talk to a variety of people who can help inform that investment decision. So they might be customers of that product. They might be executives who've worked in that space, either of competitors or people who know the business. And they're doing that to build a totally unbiased picture of what that company's doing. So they come to Arbolus to be able to, we do three main things for them. They can engage with experts for 1-hour phone conversations. They can launch surveys, and Canopy, our tool, is a video survey tool, so they can send questions, get video answers from experts through the platform. And lastly, they can track and monitor businesses that they're keeping an eye on and see core data points like NPS or churn risk of those businesses and things like that. If you boil it down to the most essential thing, really what we do, we're a market research business driven through very unique expert insights.
So let's explore this with your business. So where do you get your experts from? Where do you pull their expertise from?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think today, we've probably got approaching 200,000 registered experts on. And when we started the business in 2018, obviously we had zero. So when we first launched the business, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. But the way that we did it is we won our first customers. And then we would go and effectively recruit some of those people. We'd figure out what the customer wanted. Then we'd invite experts to come onto the platform. And we did it like that for quite a long time. Where we've got to now, we work with clients who look at very similar themes. And you can imagine what those are, right? Generative AI, for example, massively repetitive theme with a lot of our clients. And that builds up pockets of real velocity within the network. But also now we are actually using, whilst we started doing it quite manually, now we're using data a lot more to be able to build and expand that network. For example, an expert might register on the platform because they were a customer of PayFit, for example. And through tools that the platform deploys, we are surveying those people to figure out what other software products have they bought and building a really good map of exactly what their expertise is, because one individual who bought PayFit probably also buys 10 other software products, right? So we are trying through data to figure out exactly what those people's understanding is so that we can maximize their utility in the platform for future clients.
And you said about surveying. So are you using a software? How do you find the participants for the surveys?
Yeah, through the same technique. So the people who are answering those video surveys are pulled from within this community of 200,000 or so registered experts.
Okay.
The way that we actually deliver it, that's our software. So we've built a proprietary software tool called Canopy, which allows a customer to come in and say, okay, I want to speak to 20 customers of PayFit. I want to ask them the following 10 questions. Why did you buy this? Who were the other companies that you evaluated when you bought PayFit? On average, how much are you spending? And do you expect that spend to increase? Those are the types of things that investors are typically really interested in. They can create that sort of question set. They can also use GPT tools to literally create those question sets in a couple of seconds. And then they can hit send. And then the experts pulled from that 200,000 or so community are answering those questions through a link and posting videos, which the client all sees through the Arbolus platform. And lastly, I think what we figured out is If you've got 15, 20 experts answering 10 questions, that's a lot of content that the client has to go through. So we've built tools that aggregate all of those answers into a consistent report, give them summaries of all of those answers, and makes it essentially really digestible, saving our clients time. And we have been really lucky, quite frankly, with the timing of GPT tools, because there's no way we would have been able to build such a good product 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And again, this comes back to a point that I made earlier. Obviously, when we started the company in 2018, we didn't know that we'd build those products because that technology evolved during the time that we started the company. So that's why agility, I think, is such a critical thing as you're building and scaling a company.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've said, and I've seen in the research, that you work with private equity firms and consultancies. Why have they evolved to be your main client base?
I think one reason is those. So we also do work with corporate customers too. So obviously large corporates are doing research either for M&A or market entry and things like that. So we have a number of corporate clients too. But the thing that's unique about private equity and consulting is the speed at which they're evaluating many different situations is completely different to how a corporate approaches it. Even the most acquisitive corporates out there, a Microsoft or someone like that, still it's tiny as a fraction of the amount of research that someone like KKR are doing, for example. So one of the reasons those are our best customers is because of the sheer amount of research that they do. And if you think of the largest consulting firms you can think of, a McKinsey, for example, McKinsey aggregate all of the demand of a KKR and a Microsoft, and all of those are their clients. So in a way, they are an aggregator of all of that flow of research and information. So they're really good clients for us too. And then the other point I'd add as well is for private equity clients, they have a lot of upside from making good investments, right? You can doing an investment and having a 3x return on that investment versus a 5x return on that investment. Obviously, the upside to that differential is it makes our fees completely meaningless in a way, right? Because there's such potential to create value. And that's why they're really good customers for us, because if they see our tool and see what we do as a way to drive that upside, it makes them very price insensitive towards what we do. And I think this is actually one really important point that I'd share to any aspiring entrepreneurs. If you can build a business where what you charge a customer is more or less irrelevant because you're creating a great opportunity through that customer using your product, it makes it a lot easier to build and scale a company. If a customer, however, looks at your product as a cost line, very difficult to sell it, difficult to get good retention numbers and things like that, because when the next annual budget cycle comes around, people might look at that and think, do I really need it? So I think this is a really critical point.
Why did you start the business in 2018? You said you had a co-founder, but what did you see that meant that you thought that Arbolus needed to be a business supporting these clients?
Yeah, I think that there's two types of entrepreneurs. This is probably an oversimplification, but I will say it anyway. I think there are two types of entrepreneurs. There's entrepreneurs who become entrepreneurs because it's so clear that something needs to be built, and because you might not be entrepreneurially minded, but you walk into an opportunity where you're like, I can't not do this. And then there's other entrepreneurs who are driven to be entrepreneurs, will always build businesses, they'll build one company, go on to the next one, and they are serial entrepreneurs, effectively. I think I probably am more in the second camp, to be honest with you. As I said, from my early days, I'd subconsciously probably had realized that every decision I'd made and the things that I'd done, the time that I'd spent with people, it was all driven off a desire and an interest in entrepreneurship. And then after I went to business school after I left AlphaSites, and then joined a very big corporate, and a great company, but it was totally misaligned with my values, right? So it propelled me back towards this path. I left after 18 months, and decided to start this company when I was going to have my first baby in 6 months, and we just bought a house and we had a mortgage. And so I gave up my corporate salary to start a company with no salary for the first year, bootstrapping it with my co-founder in like a warehouse in London. That's an irrational thing to do. So there must have been a really strong driving force for me to do that. So I think that's the main reason. But also, secondly, when Will and I got together, because I think we were both similar in this regard, we were both very entrepreneurially driven. But we sat down and probably had one too many beers in a London pub and realized that there was a great opportunity in a space that we knew really well, right? We'd seen a great company scale to really high levels, but we also saw opportunity to evolve how those types of businesses were doing things. And I think we felt, of almost anybody out there, we're probably two of the best, most qualified people to build that company, which I think is also another really good point. If you're going to go out and raise venture capital from people and sit in front of investors, and particularly if you're a first-time entrepreneur, it's super valuable if you can be credible, right? And I know our first investors were a fund called Fuel Ventures. And I know because I spoke to the managing partner, Mark, there about this after he invested. And he was like, this was one of the main reasons. We took a bet on you because you knew your space really well and you'd seen a great company, but you'd also seen opportunities for how you could build an interesting business there.
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you want tips and strategies on how to start, grow, and monetize your business online, check out the Digital Revolution podcast with Eli Adams. We interview digital experts from around the world that share their personal stories. They talk about what they're currently working on and where they see the future going. But most importantly, they share tactics in their specific area of expertise with the hope of helping you improve your digital presence online. You can listen to the Digital Revolution podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, or simply click on the link in the show notes below.
If it was all to stop today, Arbolus, what would be, have you thought of the next business? Now, I'm not saying you're going to leave or anything like that, or it's going to show, but I'm interested because one of the things as an entrepreneur for me is that I see trends in other markets that I'm not working in. I go, oh, if I had the time, that might be an interesting business to start. Or do you have, if it all stopped today, what would be the next business? Have you even thought about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I generally don't spend that much time thinking about that.
Sure, no, of course. But I'm just wondering, what if you had to start today again with all your knowledge, all your experience? Have you, what would that be? Would it be service based or would it be maybe product based? Even maybe that distinction might help.
Yeah. So I think whenever this journey concludes in whatever form that is, the first thing I'd do is probably take a couple of months off, right?
I think it's a good idea.
It's extremely intense building a company and it's so rewarding at the same time. But I think it'd probably be good, my general bit being to have a bit of time off. And I have thought a little bit about this, particularly if you become really successful as an entrepreneur. Lots of people end up being investors, either investors of their own capital, or maybe they join a fund and they do it. Then they sit on a number of boards of lots of other startups, and that's the way that they want to help. I suspect I wouldn't do that, to be honest with you. I think I would build another company because I think that is in my DNA, and I don't know exactly what in what that might be or what it would do. I suspect though it would be something that would have a logical thread to what I'd done before. Because again, you give yourself the best chance of success, I think, if you've actually lived and breathed in a certain industry and you've had that opportunity to learn that not very many other people get because you've got that unique access. So I think it would be in that type of area. And I can't say whether it would be product or service based or what have you, but I think I'd look for an opportunity that I'd seen as a result of my experience.
Yeah. What are your marketing channels that you use for Arbolus?
Yeah, it's funny. We talked about this a little bit. I was at our global leadership offsite this week, which we had in Barcelona, which was great. Nice city to go to. Those types of things. Our marketing team is really lean. They're a fantastic team, but we're not a business that needs to have a huge marketing force in order to expand, because nobody buys our product through SEO, at least not today. It's very much driven off, I guess, great work that we're doing that spreads really quickly through word of mouth. And private equity firms are typically incredibly well connected. So word moves really quickly if you're doing great things and if you're changing for the better. So what we do for marketing that's proven really valuable, webinars have been a really effective tool. So we do webinars on topics like, the state of the market and private equity in 2024, or we had a really interesting one, actually, the last one that we did, where we had a founder of a company called Juco, who I know really well, who ended up scaling a company from startup all the way through to selling it to Nordic Capital. And he's a super inspiring guy. And we had him in addition to someone from the investment world. And that was super interesting, I think, to a lot of our audience, because private equity investors really still, even if you're investing in a mature business, you're still investing in a founder. You're still investing in someone's ability to be able to execute and take the company to 3 or 4 times of what it was when you invested. So webinars have been great because we get lots of registrants, and those people, we're talking about topics that are central to what we do. And those create really good marketing qualified leads. They lead to demos and trials and ultimately to clients. Content is also kind of something that we haven't done a huge amount of, even this type of thing. You asked me before we started the recording, why do we do this? It's great to build brand awareness and these types of things through engaging in this type of content. We've also been lucky to be placed on a couple of lists, like the FT Fast Growth 100. We've been in that for the last 2 years. This is excellent in terms of building our brand, either for customers or employees, or building a better footprint of Arbolus. Those are some of it's, rather than, I think of our marketing as quite purposeful and driven of what our company needs, rather than a more generic marketing strategy that we're just deploying based off what the playbook says.
Yeah, that's interesting, because webinars are something that were incredibly popular through COVID and was very successful. And I think I got an element of webinar fatigue because there was a lot of them going on, especially all remotely done. I'm just interested how you've been able to leverage that to get people on that, because are they doing it because of the brand? They've heard of you and they want to hear what you have to say about the market, or are these people coming as referrals from current clients and they say you should speak to Sam's presentation, Sam's webinar? How are you generating those leads to come to your webinar?
Yeah, it's a mix. If you look at the registrants of any of those webinars, I think we often have 300 registrants for lots of those webinars, which is pretty good. Yeah. And there'll be a mix of, sometimes current customers will join those webinars, so people who already know us and use the platform. Sometimes it's prospective customers. Sometimes it's people who've never even heard of us. We promote them over LinkedIn. It's often, we do our best to bring in really interesting panelists as well to those webinars. So it's often sometimes people who come through the networks of those panelists. Yeah, it's all of the above. But I agree with you, right? I personally don't join lots of webinars. I would, I think, if I found ones that were really relevant to what I'm trying to do. And either they don't find me or I don't find them. I'm not sure which it is. But I think that's what we've done a good job of for our own webinars. The themes are, like, when we started doing them, to be honest, they were themes that we weren't that credible at. They were slightly outside, and they might have been on hot topics like Gen AI or things like that. But why is Arbolus the right firm to be talking about Gen AI on a webinar? Of course, we use those tools, but we're not a Gen AI core company. Now what we're doing is we are talking about themes that we are very well placed to cover. And that's probably why they're really working now, I think, to a greater extent.
Awesome. How has your leadership style evolved over the years?
Interesting question. Yeah. Again, when you go on the journey, I think, of being a founder all the way through to building a larger company and running a larger company, they are very different skill sets. As a founder of a sort of 4 or 5 person company, you are doing so many of the tasks, right? You're the sales guy, you're the finance guy, you're wearing multiple hats. So you're an executor. When you're running a company that's 170 people, me executing on tasks makes zero difference on a day-to-day basis in the company. So actually what you need to do is and get things done through people to a greater extent, which is hard I think that's hard for founders to do because they're used to probably jumping in, rolling up the sleeves and tackling problems. So I've had to resist the temptation. I probably still am not that good at doing this, but I think great leadership for a mid-sized to larger company is about inspiring the people below you. I think about helping coach and helping people to develop and develop their thinking and kind of their self-understanding as well. And my leadership style, I think, and I was talking about this to one of our team in Barcelona yesterday, but I try and be as open as possible. There's nothing I'm not prepared to talk about. The person that I am in front of my team is the same person that I am when I'm at home and spending time with family. And I hope at least that creates some authenticity and some transparency and some trust ultimately. Yeah, I think that's very much, those are things that I really try to lean into.
And I heard a thing that Jeff Bezos said in an interview that he said, as a owner of Amazon, and you're not Amazon size, but you're a significant company. Yeah, absolutely. He said the main point of the CEO is to be able to make quality decisions. It's not the doing. You're delegating to the right people to do what you get the people in the right places, but it's all about making important key decisions. Would you agree with that?
I think that is definitely true. And I think I read something similar as well. I think one of the core points from what Jeff Bezos was saying there is actually like good leaders make really high quality decisions, but they don't make that many of them. You should really only be making 1 or 2 of those a day, or maybe even 1 or 2 of those a week. And you do need to have great decision making. But if you're making too many decisions, that's a sign that your delegation through the org structure isn't working effectively, right? So I do definitely agree with that. And fast, decisive decision making is a really good quality, I think.
Yeah. What's your idea? What's your thoughts on risk appetite? Are you a risk taker? How do you make those decisions to take those risks in business?
Yeah, so probably not naturally, to be honest. I think that's something that side of my personality has evolved a little bit. In fact, I think if I look back to my childhood, I was probably fairly risk adverse. I think as I started a company, that's evolved to become a little bit more, certainly it's become more risk seeking. We've raised venture capital, we've gone on that journey, we have lent in to being a company that has really high growth expectations and moves fast. But I wouldn't say that, I'm an entrepreneur because I'm risk hungry and because, I have a total attitude of totally embracing risk. I think I'm quite balanced, actually, to be honest with you. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's an interesting point because it shows, I think, that your personality can evolve over time to quite a large extent based off the environment that you're putting yourself in. Yeah, and now I'm a lot more risk hungry than I probably was.
Right. That's interesting because a lot of people in their younger days are quite they're attracted to the risk and they become a little bit more moderate the older they get. It sounds like you're inverse and you're taking more risks now, which is interesting. But I want to touch on your funding round. So how many funding rounds have you done and what was the first funding round and how was that successful?
Yeah, I think we've, as a company, raised about $20 million of equity, more or less, since we started the company in 2018. And that's been split between the first funding round we ever did was in about July 2019. So Fuel Ventures backed us and they did I think the first round was $1.5 million. We had a couple of angels as well who came in alongside them at that point in time. And Fuel are a great investment firm and they are very seed focused, but they help companies get to a Series A point. And they followed us probably in 2 or 3 different priced equity rounds before our series. So we probably raised money at about 4 or 5 different events, all with a different share price along the way. But we've only really had 2 unique institutional investors invest in the company. So Fuel Ventures were the first in 2019, invested in 2 or 3 priced rounds, and then 13 Books Capital came in to lead our Series A in February 2022. And that was the last, and Fuel participated alongside them. And that was really the last event. So that was a little over 2 years ago now. And we've pretty much doubled the business, or over doubled the business since our Series A, which is an interesting point, because we are doing what lots of companies are doing, which is effectively trying to grow as much as possible in a market that isn't particularly friendly to valuations and things like that, to drive growth for as long as possible before we might do the next event, which I suspect is coming now relatively soon. That's, I think, very much a common theme.
Yeah. How do you keep your best talent, your best people in your business? What's the strategy you use?
Yeah, this is again a really important point. For a company to be successful, you do have to retain your best talent and give those people a real career path to grow from. I think one of the most important things that I think our employees value is that they have the ability to drive change. We are not a hierarchical organization, and people can break out and build a new team or start working with a new client and can really have an opportunity to make of that what they will. That's one of the main things. We don't want glass ceilings above people's heads. And we want to give people great opportunities to continue to grow and develop within Arbolus. But it's hard. This is when we're 170 people now in the company, and inevitably you get attrition and people go off and leave, and sometimes really great people go off and pursue a journey elsewhere. Oftentimes that's the right thing for those people. Maybe they started their career with us, they've done 2 or 3 years or 4 years at Arbolus, and maybe it's the right time for them to go off and explore different things. It's always really sad when a great employee leaves, but it's also a great thing ultimately for us as a business, because it creates opportunities for those people that remain in the business that weren't there before. It also creates a better network for everybody who works at Arbolus. So if someone goes off and joins another interesting company over here, play that out for 5 years or so, and suddenly your network of 100 people is actually like way broader than it would have been if everybody stayed. And so attrition is not necessarily a negative thing. And I think we want to be the type of company that celebrates great people going off to do new things when it's the right time for them to do that.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
How do you manage 4 different offices globally? I'm not necessarily on the operational level, but how does your team manage a diverse workforce?
How do we manage? That's quite difficult. Yeah, it's hard when you're a business with one location and everybody sits in the same office, or at least in the same sort of time zone. It's way easier. You can bring everybody together. Even if you're a remote business, you can bring everybody together in offsites quite frequently, and you can create real alignment. We have 170 split across London, New York, Barcelona, New Delhi, and probably will open other locations in the relatively near future. Time zone from New York to New Delhi, I don't know, what is that? It's probably 10 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
Really hard for those people to really interact too much with each other. So I think at the same time we do quite a good job. we really try to encourage people to connect with each other and have quite a lot of overlap. So sometimes folks in our Barcelona office are actually working day to day very closely with people in our New York office, and there's some overlap. It's harder in the more extreme time zones to create that.
Sure.
But lots of those teams in those different locations are integrated and speak to each other a lot. But it's not at the moment fully localized, where if you're in the Barcelona office, you only ever talk and deal to people in Barcelona. And I think our team really like that. They like that sense of the fact that we are a global, multicultural business. But I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. If I said it was easy, it's not easy. It requires lots of travel, lots of active communication with different parts of the team.
And this idea of, I think where your business seems to be going is there's an element of innovation and an element of disruption in, you described it, market research. I know you describe it as knowledge exchange industry.
Yeah.
But how are you in that industry, and how are you constantly innovating and disrupting that whole industry?
Yeah, specifically the main industry, my former company and lots of businesses in that area, the main space is those are expert network companies. So there's GLG is the largest, there's ThirdBridge, GuidePoint, these types of businesses. And what those companies do really, they are brokerages for 1 hour expert calls. So a client calls up or sends a project in, and they put two people together for a 1 hour conversation, and you have an offline connection with those people. So very little software involved, very much sort of services-based businesses. We started Arbolus really with the North Star of, can we make knowledge sharing easier through technology? So could we build a software platform that allows, even if two people speak for a 1 hour call, what if we could create a messaging channel, like a Slack style interface, where if you had a follow-up question, you could ask that with the expert? What if you could actually capture the content of that conversation, create an AI transcript, and allow that client to be able to refer back to that and search the data within that? What if there was a possibility where you didn't need to do a 1 hour call? That's the only medium that's really being offered by the traditional players in the industry. But sometimes you don't need an hour of someone's time. Sometimes you've got a very specific question or a couple of questions, and you could ask those in a way easier format. So that led to Canopy, it's very much an asynchronous video Q&A tool. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. We compete in that industry, to be really specific, and we compete with just a different type of product experience than some of the more traditional players.
Okay, awesome. And what's the plan for the next 2 to 5 years for you and your business?
Yeah, we are at the moment. I think we're doing really well as a business. We're growing really strongly. We're approaching profitability, and we're also growing really strongly in a market that is not really growing, to be honest. Our demand in this industry is driven by deal activity, and as I'm sure, right, deal activity in the last 18 months has dried up big time. So the fact that we're growing at a really strong rate in that context makes me really excited about the future. Our plan really is to keep doing what we're doing. We're really enjoying ourselves. We think there's so much yet to go, both in terms of obviously the total growth of Arbolus, but also how we can continue to build products that make it more efficient to gather knowledge. That's one of the things I love about our space. I don't think we'll ever be done. We will always be thinking about how we can create more efficiency, how we can innovate on the process more. So we want to keep building the business and keep growing a great company. We don't think too much about the long-term future. But certainly for the next 3, 4, 5 years, we want to keep doing what we're doing.
And you mentioned about profitability. So are you profitable at the moment, or are you moving towards it?
So we're very close now to profitability, and we've, like every business out there, we've worked very hard to get to that point, and we've navigated the company because it's clearly very important now, whereas maybe 2 years ago it probably wasn't, and growth was still the primary metric. But at the same time, we want a balance between growth and profitability. We're not cutting our legs off and instantly jerking to profitability, because we're seeing such strong organic growth in the business, and we want to keep driving that. But I think balance is the key word. We now feel that we're in a position where growth to profitability is really nicely balanced. And we want to keep optimizing for that, really, rather than saying, let's drive EBITDA as high as we possibly can.
Yeah. All right, Sam, we're coming to the end of the interview. I ask the same 6 questions to all of my guests. Quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. First question is, what's the best decision that you've made?
Good question. I think the best decision that we have made as a business was probably to expand globally when we did. We went quite early and launched in New York and Barcelona just 18 months into the business. And that showed a certain intent, and it created this incredibly diverse global team, even in the early days.
Amazing. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
Best piece of advice? Very good question. Wow, I've received so much great advice over the years. And I think that's the great thing about being an entrepreneur. You get lots of support and lots of help from lots of different people.
But you've got to go and find it, though. That's something I've found with mentorship and coaching. You have to go and look for it to
Yeah, you
have
absolutely
a
do.
successful relationship.
And in the first couple of years, reflecting back on it, I didn't receive anything like the advice and support that I am now receiving. Maybe that's just a factor of having been doing this for quite a long time. It's really hard for me to put my finger on one unique bit of advice. Yeah, I think very difficult. I think probably the best advice that I value more highly than anything else is when a successful entrepreneur tells me. For example, just one in recent memory, I met with that panelist who sold his company to Nordic in the very early days. He's given me some really good advice throughout time about working with investors, hiring the right people. Yeah, I can't pinpoint, to be honest, anything. It's a sum of multiple parts.
That's absolutely fine. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
Probably, to be honest, the 2 founders of the business that I joined when I first graduated university. I joined them on a mission, and the company became, and it wasn't so much day-to-day help that either of them gave me, but they helped me to create this image of what was possible and to pursue really great things.
Amazing. Tell me about a regret that you have.
A regret. That's interesting. Yeah, very difficult one to answer that. I don't have that many regrets. Somebody asked me this the other day, where they said, what would you do differently if you could do it all again? And I have to be honest, there's not a lot I would do differently. And that doesn't mean that we've made perfect decisions along the way. But I really wouldn't do that much differently. And I'm not sure if I'd go back again. There's any massive learnings that I'd say we shouldn't have done that. We shouldn't have done this. Because even though some of those failures have led us to green pastures. But yeah, I think, one thing I would say, and this isn't a regret, but it's a consideration that I just think would be relevant to share. We went down the venture capital route, and that creates a certain type of business. And I think I didn't know, or fully, I just did it at the time, and that was the natural assumption that we wanted to jump on that train. I don't regret doing it, because we would never be the business that we are today if we hadn't gone down that route. But I think it's just, and I would do it again, just to be completely clear. Sure. But it's not the only way to scale a business. You can scale and build a great company without going down that route. And I think that's something that everyone should consider as an option, rather than assuming I've got to raise VC money.
What made you choose to go down the VC route? You said you wouldn't change it, but you implied, well, your answer there was you just thought that was the next stage for your business. But when you were thinking about at that point, what are the next steps? Was there other things you considered, like bootstrapping more, or what was the decision-making process of that VC?
It was certainly something we thought about, because the founders of the last business didn't really go down that route. They did raise a bit of capital, but they didn't jump on the VC train. But we knew we wanted to, because we knew we wanted to build great technology as our core differentiator. And raising VC money, if you want to do that, I think is pretty essential. So, but this is one thing I think I'd also point out that I definitely didn't appreciate. When we raised the first money, we jumped on the VC train in 2019 and raised the first money and thought very naively, oh yeah, this might be the only money we'll raise and we'll get to profitability and then we'll keep going. I think once you're on the venture train, you're on the venture train, you're running a venture style of business, and you should go into that eyes wide open, right? And maybe that's the right thing for your business, and it was for our business, but it's not the right thing for every business.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. What are you most proud of?
I'm most proud that 170 people today, and more than that, probably maybe we've hired 300 people throughout the start of the journey. I'm most proud that those people joined us on this journey and that we created something that people wanted to lean into. 100%. That's my biggest area of fulfillment from what I do.
And also, it's not just the people that that are part of your business. It's their families, their dependents, their kids going to university, their kids, there is so much more to employing people than literally the people who are the bums on the seats. So you should be proud of that.
Yeah, no question whatsoever. That is definitely what I'm most proud about. And yeah, it's been amazing. It makes all of the tough moments, and there are plenty of tough moments, 100% worthwhile for that point.
Why do you do what you do?
I think I like to push myself. So even in my sort of personal life, I like to do exercise and take on challenges or endurance events and things like that. So I think I like to be a bit uncomfortable and in a position of personal challenge. And so even when times are hard, actually, even though that might seem like a really tough moment, I afterwards actually find that really fulfilling. So I like to push myself. That's
so what sort of exercise challenges have you done?
I did an Ironman in 2017. Wow. I've done a couple of marathons. Actually, even yesterday, and this is ridiculous. I'll tell you, this is whether I'll do this or not, I don't know. But I flew back from Barcelona yesterday, beautiful evening, and flew over the English Channel. And I thought, I'd quite like to swim that. So maybe that's the next thing that's coming up, but we'll see. It's a big deal. So don't quote me on that.
No, I don't worry. It is being recorded, but we won't hold you to it, Sam. Don't worry. And lastly, what does legacy mean to you?
I think legacy just means it's the past. Legacy is stuff that's meant to be changed.
And lastly, where can people find you if they want to find out more about you or your business?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm super active on LinkedIn, always open to speaking to people, and they can message me directly through that channel. And yeah, we are open as a business. If people want to talk to us and talk to different members of the team, we're hiring in all of the locations that we're in. So we'd love to speak to anybody who wants to join the journey.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, Sam. It's a really different type of business that usually on my show. So it's been absolutely fascinating speaking to you and learning more about you and your business. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mark. Great to speak.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Business Growth Talks. This podcast is released every Monday, so don't miss an episode by subscribing to all podcast platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Have a